we don't have redundancy in all the skills on our team.
Sure.
And like, that scares me.
Hey, I'm Nick.
And I'm Graeme.
And this is the Dude, Where's My Code podcast. This is episode number 5. Graeme, you and I were just chatting about being able to staff up teams, how to scale them up, and how to approach that whole process when you're leading teams.
Yeah, for the first time in my career, I have to think about scale and future forecasting of team size and capacity. And it's been a bit of a challenge for me. So it was really nice to talk it out and learn some things about it.
Yeah, definitely a whole lot of different things to try and focus on to piece that all together. So we think that you're really going to enjoy this one. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Enjoy. You've been, how many, I don't know if it's weeks or months now with, you've done like a bit of a team, like sort of re-architecture, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way to frame it, but restructure.
Like, yeah, like you say restructure or reorg, and people think you like let a bunch of people go. So
yeah,
it wasn't that. Yeah, we reorganized the shape of the teams when we came back from the holidays. So I guess it's been kind of 2 months or
okay.
The first team just rolled into their 5th sprint.
Cool.
2-week sprints. They rolled into their 5th sprint today. So yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I know you're doing I said re-architecture because I was thinking how the different individuals had like a change in focus, right? It was more about being, I don't know if I can use the word generalist, but not just like hyper focused on you are good at this, only work on these things. So are you in a position where like what does scale look like now then? So one of the challenges before, with any startup and any small company, there's lots of everything to do all the time, and everything is the first priority. So, in terms of, again, I keep wanting to say restructure, but I mostly just want to say like refocus. Like, how has that been working in terms of? I don't know if productivity is the right way to right measurement, like the feeling of your team effectiveness.
Yeah, we talk about it as effectiveness, and there's like a few elements to that. Velocity is a big one.
Sure.
Focus, they're interconnected, but they're things that we think about and reflect on. The feedback is, at least from the team members, has been overwhelmingly, we really appreciate the focus that we get out of this structure. Like, we appreciate, cool. And we feel more productive and more efficient because all of the conversations for that team are focused around a specific initiative or a specific problem they're trying to solve. And so there isn't all these kind of disparate challenges coming up and, hey, can you help me solve this? And can you help me solve this? And they're all like in different domains. It's like we're doing this one single initiative. And so there's a lot of appreciation for that.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, everybody feels like they are delivering, like their throughput has gone up. We don't have a baseline to compare against. Sure. We didn't measure this before, but certainly, yeah, just simply from kind of like a bottom up reflection, and then also from me kind of looking at what we're getting done, I do feel like it has really done what we set out to do.
I would find it hard to believe that like overall effectiveness has not improved if overwhelmingly every individual was saying like, I feel like I can focus more, I feel more productive, because I would say it would be statistically unlikely that every person on the team is just a slacker and being like, oh, now I have more time to like do other stuff. And like that, it's great. Right. They probably genuinely feel like, and they probably genuinely are more productive.
Yeah, it's been, I would say so. I think I've been surprised at the amount of stuff we've been able to like build and deliver the way we have. I mean, it's not without its challenges.
Sure.
But those are the kind of challenges that I think, like, for the most part, have to be solved one way or another. And so we like the benefits we get out of this new structure. And we'll just kind of tweak and tune to see if we can fix some of the things that haven't been smooth.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So, in terms of the ever growing backlog and all the priority zero things, like, have you felt like that's made a shift in that, or does it seem like you still need more help? Like, how's that looking?
We're gonna have to see that we did this thing where we're like doing we're migrating our web platform from like a very old kind of web structure to a new one.
Okay.
And so this quarter was unique in that I asked basically for almost the entire engineering focus to be on this thing. So like both teams are focused on one epic, and we kind of break down into components, and each of the teams kind of tries to stay focused on specific components, but we're not working on like things in like the teams aren't working on like separate initiatives in parallel, which is eventually the goal, like hopefully divide into kind of domains and kind of work on separate things. But right now everyone's kind of focused on the same like web app migration. And so it's hard to know how effective we'll be at delivering different types of initiatives that span the stack differently, because this web app migration is like mostly front end with some back end and basically no mobile. So there's like, it's interesting, but we are coming up on our, I guess, new fiscal year. And with that, you know, as an organization, we want to do our yearly budgeting and planning just kind of at the business level. And so there starts to be the questions arise about, okay, well, how's the engineering team doing? Like, can we, are we good? Do we need more people? What can we get done this year? Do we have enough people to get the work done? And so that what's interesting is when we did this restructure, I actually called out multiple ways in which the structure could scale.
Okay.
And so when we think about if we want to add people to the engineering team, we actually have multiple vectors to do it through, which is really cool. We can add people to the squads. So like in theory, make the squads able to deliver faster. So if we say the data says right now, whatever, the average initiative can be delivered in like 1.5 months by a squad, whatever, then what might that number look like if we added another engineer to that squad? So they go from a team of 3 to a team of 4. And we're trying to use some data to figure that out. The alternative is, if we're happy with the size of the squads, what if we hired and built a third squad? Could we tackle 3 types of initiatives in parallel? So we kind of chop through that initiative backlog faster, not because we're getting them done faster, because we're doing more at a time.
Right.
And so just different thoughts about how we might grow the team. But then the question becomes, how many people and when, and I think most importantly, why?
Right. Yeah, and the reality is that it's going to come back to why, right? Like when you're trying to make a case for this, in any one of those directions that you were calling out, whether you're scaling out these individual squads or adding more, it needs to come back to why, because you could form arguments or reasons, right? You could back it up with different data points in either of those directions, but like what does the business need? What are they valuing? What are they prioritizing? And then you need to come up with that and present it, right? To be able to say, this is why, and this is effectively how that will translate. That's definitely challenging, especially when, because I heard you saying like trying to get some data about if we were to add a person to a squad, like what do we anticipate that looks like for scaling, right? And when the squad is small, that can be really challenging. So if you had a team of 2 people, right, and you're like, oh, if we add 1 more person, like you don't have a ton of data to be able to have a lot of confidence in what that translates into, but you don't have 0 data either. So can you, like, do you have thoughts on how you have been trying to kind of frame that up? Like what sorts of things do you look at say within a squad, what kinds of metrics are you trying to factor in to be like adding one more person would potentially drive these metrics, and here's why?
This whole like forecasting headcount needs for an organization or a team is like one of the things that is new to me in kind of the level
Sure.
or position I'm in. I've gone and asked for engineers at other organizations where, I mean, one, we have piles of investment money and a very large engineering org. And so, I want to move my team from 4 to 6 people. It's like not the hardest conversation to have because
There's
that's
headcount somewhere, and it can be moved, and yeah.
yeah, for many reasons. And I was advocating for adding engineers to support a specific domain of the product at that time. So if I was at Circle CI and I'm like, hey, the insights team, we know like this is kind of the kinds of things we want to take the direction we want to take the team in, and these are the kinds of initiatives we want to build. And with this team, this is kind of the velocity we've had. But I find that much harder to do when you're talking about like an entire engineering organization in a company. I was up laying in bed late the other night, and I was like trying to do the math in my head, which is such a stupid thing to do because that is not my forte. But I was like, okay, if we take some like assumptions where we say, let's assume an engineer needs 10% of another engineer's time for like code reviews.
Sure.
And they also have to give up 5 to 10% of their own time to help others, like in mentorship and like peer growth and whatever. And so I was trying to do this, like, when you add somebody, like how much are you taking away from the rest of the team? And like, and it got,
Like,
I was like,
what's the net effect of one more engineer? Right? Because we know going from 2 to 3 isn't a 50% effectiveness.
right. There's probably like someone who's good at calculus could probably put that into an equation. It won't be perfect, I'm sure, but I think the things I was thinking about, there is probably a way to like map that. But I also think it's naive to put that much effort into like a clean calculation when we know like there's too many factors, even if you can
right.
try and quantify some of that. So I was just laughing because it was like I probably spent half an hour like mulling this all over, and then it was like, what the hell am I doing? Just go to sleep. So what do we look at? Like I said, we have limited. This would be different if we've been operating in the process that we're operating in for a while, and we haven't been. And so we have limited data, but we can kind of use what we had in our old structure, got checked with what's true in the new structure, and kind of see. So like I said, I'm trying not to drill down to like get a velocity number like per engineer. For a couple of reasons. I think like I don't think teams work that way, and I think when you have someone who's a lead and they're spending more time on task management, but they're also delivering against tasks, and you have someone who's like maybe a little more junior and so is a little more senior, if you are trying to like take a team's delivery or an organization's delivery and pare that down to like, well, this is what we get out of an engineer.
Right.
Like I think it's like it's too individualistic for like what an individual offers a team and how a team delivers. So I've been trying to stay kind of at this like team level and say, okay, if we have a team of 3 and our average initiative takes, a month and a half to complete, what do I think that looks like if we add another engineer? And it's okay, each sprint we probably have a slightly higher velocity, but we know it's not
exactly it's not mathematically perfect by
yeah. And linear. So like we increase velocity in that regard, and just like take a really like conservative perspective on, well, if it's not, if a month and a half doesn't go to a month, like a month and 1 week, right? Like, what does that look like? And then I kind of extrapolate, like, what does that look like over a year if every initiative was able to have like 1 week carved off it? Right. And that's just like a starting place for, okay, I think we get this out of a new engineer, and here's how that unlocks like benefit in terms of either getting initiatives delivered faster or just like being able to get through the list of things we think we want to do this year. And so it also requires saying, okay, we think that it takes roughly this long for an average sized initiative. And this is like super loose and like a little bit hand wavy. And then we also say we also have some technical investments that we want to get to. And we also spend some percentage of our time, and we do have the data for this, which is like we have some percentage of time that we spend on bug fixing and on like kind of random requests that we weren't anticipating that come in. And so we can and so then you kind of go, okay, if I take all of that for what we think we want to work on this year and all the initiatives that we have been putting off that we would like to get to, and then add bug time, random request time, and probably some buffer, because we know this isn't perfect and teams need Slack time anyway. And also, let's not forget that our engineers take time off, they get sick, we have events and holidays and et cetera, et cetera. And from there we kind of go, okay, well then we have like this many weeks or sprints or months or whatever measure you want to use of like stuff that we have to get through. And this is what we have in team capacity with our current velocity, at least. And then what might that look like in different scenarios? And we have a bunch of levers we can pull, which is adding an engineer or two. What does that do to how much we can get to, or when? Or, okay, of that list, is all of it critical? Or is there like, can we pare that down to like we think we absolutely have to support our org priorities? And then additional, and what risk do we take on if we don't do like a certain technical initiative? And so we can kind of play with that as well and say, now we have scenarios that we can use to look at against a budget, if we have one, for what we like. Because the reality is, if the budget is zero,
there's no conversation.
It's kind of a futile exercise, at least talking about the adding headcount part, but not about the like, what initiatives can we get to and what do we have to cut, because we have to be more ruthless with our prioritization. If there's sub budget, but it's like maybe it's not clear. Maybe it's like, well, we need justification, but we maybe have it if we need it, and then we can talk about, okay, well, how much of these things we think we want to get to do we think are important, how much risk do we want to take on for not doing the things that aren't important. And then keep in mind that we can't flex on the like bug time and Slack time. I mean, I guess we can, except we've already, the numbers I have today reflect a very high bar we've set for not addressing bugs unless they're basically like user blocking completely. And so that, like, I'm like, I can't get that number down anymore without us not working on stuff that blocks people. But maybe the world would be different if,
I had a thought. I probably should not have jumped into very quickly saying, oh, no budget, can't do anything. After I said it, I was like, you know what, like, that's not really fair. Maybe potentially like in a smaller team, like that might be the case, but certainly as organizations grow larger, like there are absolutely situations where it's like, look, there's no budget, do more with less or do more with the same. And it's like, well, what does that mean, right? Like, how do you, we talked about this before, where it's like you start putting constraints in place and you watch people get very creative. Like engineers are extremely good at this. So if you have an organization, it's like, okay, there's no budget. And it's like, yeah, well, we still want to be moving faster. You want more people to help. Like, okay, well, what could we do, right? And maybe it's a matter of like, where do we start looking for, again, perhaps not in the situation that you're in, but if you had larger organizations that have really expensive services and stuff that are running, could you start to say, look, we can save money on this thing? And if we can prove that we can save money, perhaps that means we could get budget back out of it, right? So you're in a position where you're not adding headcount necessarily, but you start to save money that gives you more budget back, instead of being like, look, we have to spend even more to try and deliver more. So I just wanted to say I probably shouldn't have jumped in so quickly to say that.
I think in most small organizations, I mean, unless you have some insane infrastructure requirements, or I'm not, I guess I don't know, I haven't experienced it, but I feel like for most startups, engineers' salary, it probably outsizes like the software portion of your budget or the other things. And so there's like real scrutiny put to adding headcount because it's the largest chunk of the budget and it's perpetual. And like we talk about this
Yeah.
a lot, is like you hire someone and that's great, but that's not just this year's budget. That's next year's budget and next year's budget and next year's budget. And you want to be growing people. So in theory, that's actually like an increasing cost as well.
Yeah.
So that um, is a little like I am all for, I mean, looking for savings anyways. We both have experienced at like bootstrapped organizations where you're kind of constantly in like cost cutting mode, but not like impact, like not doing that, not negatively impacting, but not being like overly frivolous with
Yeah. Yeah.
spend. And so I think when we work in that space, yeah, it's a matter of like, if the organization can't support headcount add, then we can't, and that's a reality. And if we can, I think where I get a little bit stuck myself, and sometimes I'm a little bit hard on myself in this regard, but I start thinking about, okay, I just talked through how I might think about adding headcount this year and justifying it with the initiatives to get what we want out of this year. But a lot of the advice I've seen talks about forecasting further than that. And I mean, you kind of need to, because if you're going to hire people, presumably you think you need them, unless you're a bunch of the companies that overgrew in the last couple of years and had to cut headcount, right? Like there's a real problem. But in general, you're hopefully thinking longer term about these hires.
Yeah, it's not just this one project and we need someone. Probably not. Maybe there are situations, but you probably aren't looking to hire full time. You might want to hire like a contractor or something, which is a possibility in those situations.
So we can't frame all of the benefits of a new hire into like what we'll get this year because we have years coming. So the part that I always get a little bit stuck on is, well, I don't know what is coming in years to come. So I can't frame a hire in terms of how they'll deliver against those things. And so I'm trying to get my head around, how do I frame the benefit of adding an engineer and increasing velocity, and talk about that in terms of like speed to deliver things, abstract things, or or unlocking like new capabilities, I guess, if we needed that. But thinking about how I can pitch that to someone, knowing that neither of us know what we need in the years to come. Presumably we have more stuff we want to build faster, but I can't just say, give me more engineers so we build faster, because that's too obvious. Like, sure, how fast? So,
I have two thoughts, I guess. One, I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but the question that I have for you is going to be about when you're talking with other leadership members, like what are those stakeholders interested in hearing? So I'd like to hear that from you. But before, I was like, as you're talking, I know that both you and I are very much managers that I believe like we pay attention to people. Like engineers are people, engineers aren't resources. And I know this whole conversation has been about resourcing and basically tying dollar amounts to engineers, but this is very clearly for a specific purpose about trying to get budget and head count. And that's the framing of this conversation. So I just wanted to take a moment to say, like, based on this conversation, if anyone's listening or watching, it's not a matter of like engineer equates to just dollar value and output. Like, it's not the case. You've already mentioned the fact that you want to be able to grow engineers, right? Like, you've said it. So technically their costs should be increasing because their salary should be going up because they are being better engineers. Like, these are all other things that we talk about a lot in other episodes, but the focus of this conversation is very much about, I'm in a situation where I would like to scale a team, and it's a business that will require money. So yes, unfortunately, this entire conversation gets framed about, how do I take dollars and equate them to human beings? And it kind of feels crappy, but in isolation. So I just wanted to mention it because I know you and I, when we talk about this, like we're aware that we're, very invested in our teams. We want to grow their careers, but it's not being discussed here, not because of it's of no value, just because it's a separate topic.
Yeah, that's a great point. I still don't enjoy when I'm in conversations and they are referred to as resources.
Resources.
It's never been comfortable, and I don't even like talking about it as resourcing. Most of the framing that I use internally is actually, I mean, I guess the term headcount is pretty like de facto, and so it becomes okay, like because it's how many people, and maybe it's better to talk about them as people than heads. But there's also, yeah, this element of like growing the team and, you know, adding, I guess, adding capacity. But yeah, I see what you're saying about uh, making sure it doesn't feel like we're just talking about people as like machines, like money in, product out. Um,
Yeah, we're in this conversation we are focused on the business aspect of this, and that it's going to involve a lot of dollar to human to output kind of thing. Even earlier I said productivity, and then right after I was like, I wonder if effectiveness is a better word. And you even said, you talk about effectiveness, it's not about like measuring units of productivity, right? It's like the fact that you even said, like, I'm looking at how my team feels about this. They feel more productive. They feel they have better focus. Like, that's really what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, and that's the part that we get to influence as managers and leaders, you're not going to sit there and make people's hands move faster on a keyboard, or like scare them into problem solving faster. What you can do is motivate them, encourage them, get them engaged into doing their best work possible, and the rest is kind of up to them. So that's the input that we have. So I didn't want to go through the whole conversation and not take a moment to say, like, we understand that engineers are people, like,
yeah,
100%.
that's a great call out.
But the other part that I was asking you was about the sort of stakeholders that when you're coming up with this information and trying to get sort of, whether, I don't know if you'd call it like sign off, but basically have the go ahead to be able to hire and look at that, based on budget and all of that. Um, what are and I don't know if you actually know the answer to this yet, or if you're exploring it, but like, has someone come to you and said, like, we want it explained in this capacity, or are you trying to figure out with those stakeholders like the most effective way to relay that?
I think it's the latter. I think there's a few ways to go about it. The reality is, when you're doing annual planning at the organization level, you're literally talking about your annual budget.
Right.
And so it kind of is framed as, hey, like, what do you think you need this year? And as I said earlier, that's kind of across the board. But the reality is that salaries make up much more than software spend. So we're probably less concerned about what individual pieces of software we have to spend on, and more like, is your team good in size, or does it need to change? And so it's mostly, what do you need? I've had a senior leader tell me, like, hey, put together a plan of what you need, and I can't promise that you will get it, but it's a good starting point for a conversation. And I think that's great. I appreciate that, because it's cool for me to be able to go, okay, let me go through the exercise of thinking about, what do I want engineering to look like? But again, it comes back to the why. And like, I don't know, like, need is tough to wrangle sometimes. Like, we don't have redundancy in all the skills on our team.
Sure.
And like, that scares me. If one person is like sick, or has to step away for a while, or ultimately chooses to leave, if we lose that skill and we don't have a redundancy for it, it's a gaping hole in the team that we either have to fill, and backfilling takes time, or have
Right.
someone step into, and we lose team like efficiency and
And
effectiveness.
that's very common for smaller teams, right? Like it's when you have smaller teams, like unless you have everyone who's just like a perfect generalist, and then you don't have like skills that you're going to miss because there are no like specific skills. Yeah, like that's gonna be a huge challenge.
So there's that way to carve up need, just from purely like a risk mitigation. There's how we could increase the team's delivery across types of initiatives. There's how we could improve or level up the technology that we're using by investing in people who either have specific skills or could help us build new
Right.
systems that handle different things. Like there's just so many ways to slice need that it always is. It's a scary place to be for someone to be like, tell me what you need. I'm like, well,
Well, I have a couple thoughts on that, I guess. So the first part was when you started talking about things you need, what I noticed was that you were talking about what's a good way to frame this, like general categories of things, which I thought was really cool because you didn't say, well, we have this feature, that feature, and this feature, therefore we need these things. I assume at some point that comes up in your thought process, but you started by talking about redundancy and team skills. You talked about um sorry, I'm drawing a blank. It was what can I think?
new
New
technologies.
technology, sorry.
Yeah.
I was so stuck on the redundancy part, but yeah, being able to build out like new like technology gaps and skill sets, like to me that's a lot more of like a strategic approach versus like a tactical, like these are just the pieces of work coming up. And again, I'm not saying that you ignore that, but I thought that was really interesting because the point you said earlier was this isn't just a what do we got to do this year and how do we get the head count to go do it. It's like it goes beyond that. So to me, I thought that was really cool that you were including these things because they can extend well beyond your current like horizon for your roadmap. So
As an agile shop, I don't know what, I don't know the size of the things coming up. We have like a roadmap. We use like a now, next, later kind of framework for roadmap. I think it's like a template that Netflix championed. But anyway, I really appreciate that we haven't said in this quarter we'll do this work and in this quarter we'll do this work, because without going and breaking that work down and estimating, we cannot safely say we can get that work done in that time frame. And it always
right.
drives me a bit crazy. I get a little like frustrated in environments where we're like, let's take these initiatives that we haven't vetted and like slot them into Gantt charts, and I'm like, how, like, in what world can we
It's
possibly do
going
that?
to change.
Guess why like so many people abandon waterfall, because all projects are running over time and over budget because we made all these assumptions that turned out wrong. This is why agile was born. And so I get a little knotted up about, hey, let's think about all the initiatives that we want to do for the next couple of years and how we could deliver against those, because it just makes no sense to me. So I have to go another way with it.
Yeah, you can use that as like a like almost like a north star to say that's the direction we want to go in. But 2 years out, like there's no way you can budget for like headcount accordingly. Like, and I shouldn't say accordingly, accurately. Like it's just not possible because you don't know what you will need at that point. You can anticipate like we need to grow into these areas. That's what we think right now. So let's come up with a strategy for it. But I feel like that's the extent of it, personally.
I was chatting casually with the CEO a bit about this, and he was like, because I was telling him how like lost I was. That he's like, as a starting point, can you not like do you not know people in the industry? And I was
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know some people in the industry. And he's like, well, so you've already told me a few ways that you like think about the work we do. And one of the ones I haven't touched on yet in this conversation is like, we have a native mobile app, we have a web platform, we have like a backend database infrastructure that supports all that, and like there's like many like components or domains like within those, but we have these like core like systems or whatever you want to call them, platforms. And so he was like, why don't you go talk to some industry people about, hey, like, for a feature filled mobile app, like what do you think would be an appropriate team size to be able to like maintain and deliver new features in that, right? Like and just like pull the room and see. People might say anything between 2 and 5, and who knows, but maybe just get like a temperature on that. And then same thing, like, okay, a fully featured modern web app, how many people do you need to like maintain one of those and like build out new features constantly in it? And then like same thing with the infrastructure, how many people do you need to keep infrastructure up and running and then like be able to improve on it and like add automation and efficiency? And then like, why don't you just like sum those numbers and see what the industry would expect you to need to
As
do
a
things you
starting
need
point,
to do,
right? Like to
yeah, just as like a, hey, are we anywhere close to what we think,
yeah,
or what others think we should be? I mean, there's something to be said for, hey, there's tons of small lean startups that have like 2 or 3 engineers that do crap tons of awesome work, and like,
yeah,
sure, totally. But we're also not the kind of organization who is hiring people to work like many overtime hours and like grind and grind and grind. We're kind of past that, and so we're not going to be as like lean as the 4 individuals in an accelerator office like building something. So it's like interesting perspective to think about. Oh, what does an organization of our size, or at least our like product size, like what does an organization like that usually look like in terms of engineering capacity?
It sounds like you have good support in this though too, because I know you said when someone asks you like, what do you need? Like, it's a bit of a scary question, right? But what I really liked about that, and I'm making assumptions here about the people you work with, but that sounds like a really inviting way to say, don't like, don't try to guess at what I want to hear from you. You tell me what you need as the starting point, and it's like I plan to meet you there, right? Like I want to hear from you. So it's like they're trying to bridge the gap from their side, letting you kind of just express what you want, which I think is really cool, because I know, of course, as you're putting this kind of framing together, you are trying to think about what they want to hear and the best way to kind of make it make sense to them. I just thought that that was a very inviting way for them to be like, to me, it sounds like, let me try to take some of the stress away from you on that, so that you're not like, how do I, I'm not saying that you will, how do I make the best PowerPoint to like, just put all this information in front of someone, but it's like, just get figured out what you need, right? And then I will kind of meet you there to navigate that with you. To me, that sounds really cool.
I think about it as, if an organization is going to give budget to hiring people, it's not very different from someone going to pitch a VC investing their money. Like, you want to know, what is my spend going to accomplish? Right. So you have to be able to justify, if you're going to go and say, I want VC so I can invest in 5 more engineers to build this cool product idea I have, they're going to say, how does my spend get you those 5 engineers, and what do those 5 engineers accomplish in terms of what you're trying to build against? Does it ramp up? Like, why do you need 5? Like, is there a timeline you're trying to hit that where you think 5 engineers is the right,
yeah, if there's no rationale behind it, it's like,
if you don't have that, then the answer is like, well, why not 1 or 2? Why don't you just build it? Why do you need to hire anybody? And so
you don't need 100 engineers to go do what you're trying to say.
Definitely. And so I'm just trying to put myself in that mindset and think, if an organization is going to invest, the leadership responsible for like managing the budget and make sure the company stays afloat are thinking very similar things, which is like, what do we get out of the money we're going to invest in this ask? And I guess that's the part that is new territory for me, is being able to advertise, oh, well, for this much money, I can get you this. It's like, what is this? And it's, yeah, it sounds like, there's a few ways to like slice it, and I'm not sure there is a right answer, because the more people I talk to, the more variation in answers I get. And so maybe because there is no expectations in how that would be delivered, it just comes down to finding one that I think is like, I'm most comfortable speaking to and starting there.
I liked a bunch of things you said, right? I think so. I have not been in a situation where I've been given budget where it's like you have X dollars, go figure out how to spend it. And to be totally transparent, it's been mostly like in startup land, trying to figure out like having these conversations of if you're expecting this similar type of velocity, so be it, like no change. But if you're expecting more, or if you're expecting this velocity and for us to not be burnt out from it because we have been overworked, that's pretty. There's no dancing around that. It's very common at smaller companies. So if we've been doing this and you want it to be sustained, or you want more, like we need more people. And I've been kind of in a fortunate position where that hasn't been too hard to justify. Doesn't mean that like it just happens, but like I think I have been in situations where there's enough evidence to say like we've been delivering these types of things. If you'd like to continue on that path, like it's consistent enough that we can show you that, and that's why we need like an extra person. So I've kind of lucked out that way. So I don't have a ton to offer on my experience there, but I think a takeaway for me personally and how you've been kind of framing this is that I don't think there's one right answer. And I really like that earlier in the conversation you were saying, I'm starting to talk about how the current initiatives that we're kind of looking at, how bringing on someone would help with that. And the fact that you were layering in, we know it's not just a person to go accomplish these things in, this quarter, this year, whatever. It's beyond that. So I like the takeaway for me was that I liked that it was not only tactically, if I can call it tactically, for the shorter term, like what does this look like? Because I feel like that can be really helpful for communicating more immediate value. So I like that framing, but then adding on to that, like, yeah, this is like from a business perspective, this becomes a cost that is every year. So we need to be thinking beyond the current year. And obviously, it becomes more nebulous the further you go out. And I would personally expect that you need less like evidence or supporting like data the further out you get. But I think for me that was like a good balance between the two, is to be able to speak to both of those sides. Um, and yeah, I don't know, like obviously the more data you can have, I feel like the different ways that you can try to slice and dice the different data that you were talking about, like to me that's where the value is, because when you're trying to articulate it to someone, if they're not getting it one way, like they're going to ask you more questions. And if you've been thinking through these different perspectives on it, I just feel like you're better primed to be able to say, well, okay, if you're not seeing the value in that capacity, if we talk about it this way, I've already kind of thought through this, then perhaps maybe this makes more sense. So I like that a lot.
I have to assume that most organizations, if you are they're not going to run out of things to do. I have to assume that we have like an ever growing backlog as we uncover what our customers like need or want or
love
can
to
do.
find that company that just gets done everything and they're like, you can just stay on the payroll
and you just got to maintain what we have today.
Yeah, just don't code anymore. There's no more bugs.
Yeah, exactly. And so, if you can justify needing people to help build what you need today, you're going to be able to use them tomorrow and so on, right? There's no and hopefully the more you build, the more money you make. The more money you make, the more you can justify the people you have to pay to
right.
build, I think. So, I mean, at least I don't have to be too worried about overcommitting that way. Huh. All right. Well, I gotta go. Yeah. I gotta go do some slicing and dicing. Apparently,
yeah. more back of the napkin math with engineers times dollars, right?
Yeah. Well, I lay awake at night.
Yeah. Well, that's the only time that your brain's gonna try to do it, right? So you don't need sleep. No, it's cool though. I think it's definitely an interesting challenge. So I think that's it's a good growth opportunity, right? Like it's challenging to go through. It's uncomfortable, but that's probably, the best way to learn. So I think you'll do great at it. I think you're probably being more difficult on yourself just because it feels uncertain. But I think you're doing all the right things. Being someone who's never done exactly what you're doing before, it seems like a good approach to me.
Just want someone to give me the answer.
Yeah, cool. No, that's a great conversation. I love this kind of stuff too, because in months from now or whatever, we can touch base and be like, hey, so that time you put that headcount proposal together, what happened, right? Like, how did that translate? Like, it's cool. It's or did you have to do it again? And the second time through, third time through, like it feels like it's more obvious, right? Like the learnings from these conversations are great. So it'd be exciting to see.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks folks for watching or tuning in to listen. If you can do us a favor, like the video or leave a comment, both would be great. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
The wave.